Hello again, everyone. Okay, so we're going to do something slightly different in this panel, just to get the energy up here. This is completely unplanned, so you're going to have to bear with us a little bit. At the end of this session, we're going to open it up to the audience for some questions. Ideally, policy, not company questions, though, but take anything. We don't have mics that are able to roam around this beautiful, wonderful building right now, so we're going to ask you to actually just speak very, very loudly. All right, so start thinking about your questions now. But firstly, let me kick off. We are so pleased to have all of you here. We have the co-chairs of the Unicorn Council for UK FinTech here. It's been 2 years since we launched the council with our co-founding chair, Philip and Zllch. It's been fantastic. It's been a really interesting 2 years, I think, in the UK and on the geopolitical landscape. And as we've heard throughout the morning already, we're at quite an inflection point at the moment in terms of what's happening in the rest of the world, in terms of the UK, in terms of the role of technology transforming the sector and beyond. So we know the UK has made an attempt to position itself as the undisputed fintech capital. How do you think we're doing?
You want me to start?
Yes, go for it.
All right, so my name's Philip, co-founder, CEO of Zllch. It's an interesting question. I think a lot of today has been very positive about how far we've come, and that's always fantastic. For me and for our business, I always like to say to the board, we should be proud of how far we've come, and we've built something great today. But let's look at the future, and who really, let's all give ourselves a tap on the back, but not spend too long thinking about that. Let's really worry about the future here and the go forward. And I think some of what we need, we've talked about here. We've obviously made some good progress as a Unicorn Council, and we obviously one voice in a big sea of voices, but there's already been some good traction. What we really need to see, and it has been mentioned, is we need everyone to lean in and support the ecosystem. So you have great companies, people are building brilliant businesses, we've got a brilliant startup ecosystem. Scale up is a bit of a challenge when it comes to capital. And pension fund reform and having pension fund money find its way into British stocks is critical. I know it was mentioned earlier, but I want to mention just one stat. So, 25 years ago, you had 50% of pension fund money was in British stocks. Today, that's less than 3%. And to be clear, it's less than 0.07% in venture. So the problem is a big one. And right now, companies, at least like ours, we've raised capital, we're larger businesses already, but there's Series A, B, C companies raising as we speak here in the market today. And if they're raising from foreign capital, that's going to change the makeup of the board. It's going to move that power away from the UK, and then we shouldn't be surprised to see these companies ultimately listing abroad. So that's the big challenge I think we need solving.
Thanks, Phil. Charles or Francesca?
Yeah, just to add what Phil's saying, I think if you go back to the origination of the Unicorn Council, why did we set it up? And actually Ryan is here with Phil and Janine's great idea. Remember all the things that Phil has said about the UK. It's a great place to start a business. The incentivization, entrepreneurship, common law, all the skills and talent, all the great stuff, start a business here. The class of 2016, of which Clearbank was part, Revolut going on, Starling, Monzo, all of those 10 years on, have we got global winners? What we were after was we got fantastic unicorn companies in the UK, but were we winning globally? And so how do we get that scale-up part through the Unicorn Council? And we have had some successes, right, with the regulators in terms of the scale-up unit, which the FCA has now done. How do they actually get the flywheel going faster for license applications, new product approvals, tech approvals, capital reviews, so that actually everything happens much faster, and therefore companies like ours can grow much faster? And Revolut's a brilliant example of all of that. Yes, they had to wait a long time in relation to the license, perhaps longer than they would like, but actually got there. And again, are now accelerating, but building a global business that Francesca and crew can be very proud of. Clearbank, the same in relation to Europe. We're opening branches now in Paris, in France, in relation to sales, going to the US. Phil as well in relation to Lithuania, new acquisition. right? So we are, to the extent of all that we're doing, of speaking with one voice, we've got greater engagement with regulators and government, as we've seen. Can we get the flywheel going even faster?
Thank you, Charles. Francesca.
Okay, no, I agree. Thank you for reminding me about the long time, Charles. So
Sorry.
I'd forgotten. So anyway, I'm Francesca. I'm the CEO in the UK for Revolut. And yeah, we joined forces probably a year and a half ago. It syncs very well with our latest timeline. So I would have to say, I agree with you, okay. Every time you reach a milestone, something is achieved, there are 10 more to be achieved, and that's life. At the same time, I think you don't realize what's been done if you watch it day by day, but when you look back and take a picture, right? So I think a lot has been achieved. And I think if I had to point at one thing is the level of dialogue, communication, and in fact actually action taking between this group here, so FinTech, the industry, government, and regulators are completely 10x in the last year and a half. Because right now, at least, of course, not everything can be solved. Not everything is solved quickly enough. I agree with you. The pension side, there's been some accord made, but not a lot of action. But we are all in sync in terms of what are the problems, and actions are taking place, right? In particular, I would say after the shift from regulatory standpoint, right, the addition of the growth objective and competitive objective has shifted dramatically the type of conversations we're having, and there is attention to really balance a little bit the equation. So that is, I think, is a soft thing, but I will not underestimate it because it's been a door opener to many conversations.
Great. So I've got one more question for you on kind of the macro piece and on the policy side. And then I want to hear a little bit more about you all as founders and leaders of unicorn businesses. If you had to build your business from scratch right now, again, would you choose the UK?
I can start, okay. So I would say yes. And remember, I come from Italy. Probably you figured this out by now. so it's not an obvious choice, but absolutely yes, because of the parallel ecosystem. At the end, to build a business, you need three things. You need capital on one side, you need talent, so human capital on the other side, and then you need a regulatory and infrastructure framework that works, is modern, and is supporting of innovation. These are the three things, three ingredients. Now, it's difficult, if you can think, why doesn't every country set this up, right? It's not easy, because each one of them is really an ecosystem that is a virtual circle, so it's not easy. And I think in UK, this is still the case. This is still the country where you can come and everything is your fingertips, and you have the human capital, normal capital, and then a very good and supportive regulatory framework. And if we think when innovation started, when FinTech started, there was a push from a sandbox point of view and all that. So I would say yes. Now, as everything in life, it's like us running a business. You never sit on the laurels, right? You always think, okay, what can change? And I think there are two key question marks that I will keep in my mind if I had to do it over again right now. One is when you build a business, you look at the target addressable market. So what's the size of the market you're going to address? And clearly that is an important one for the UK. After Brexit, the total addressable market in the UK has shrunk. It went from a market that was like 600 million people to 60 million. So you need, as a funder, you need to expand that market. You're going to Lithuania and so on. So for the UK to build bridges and rebuild a bigger target addressable market is important. And the second one is, is also the, capital liquidity and all that, making sure it is not only in the early stage, but in the scale-up stage, there is enough critical mass and risk appetite to invest.
Charles.
Absolutely, yes. A lot of people thought when we founded ClearBank that we were crazy, right? So there was almost a monopoly in relation to the big four with payments and clearing. There was the tech revolution. It's all about tech. We know that. In addition to that, we needed to get a banking license. And remember, the first new clearing bank in 250 years, it was because you couldn't become a member of the payment scheme unless you had a banking license. We didn't have one of those. What we did have, though, was, having spoken to the Treasury of the Bank of England, that if there were going to be no blockers of allowing us to do it, we were up for the fight. And proving it, we knew that if you could do it in one jurisdiction, then we could export it. And we know that every fantastic global business has to start with domestic strength. You've got to prove it out, and then you can go international. Yeah, I'm mad and passionate about the UK. We can look at everywhere else in relation to all the things, regulator and all that, but actually we have got all the components here. But you have to work incredibly hard to make it all happen and fit it together. And the Brits are really good. I mean, it's not just the Brits, because you talked about the inclusion diversity we have in London and the UK, right? That resiliency you need to keep going and the passion to make it all happen. And we're good at that, right? And as we've got more cohesion across industry, government, regulators, fintech, but we're back to the same message you keep hearing, well, you need to go faster, right? We need to make it all work. And of course, the Yanks and the Americans can actually do things faster in relation to the stablecoin world and digital assets and all of that. Do you want to be a fast follower, or do you want to be the leader? We must be a fast, emphasis on fast follower if that's what we're going to be. Otherwise, we're going to get dollarized, and the US will actually beat us to the race. So there's, as Francesca says, we're never complacent. There's so much more to be done.
Phil.
Yeah, I would say still, again, I'm South African. I came here for the fiscal policies to set up business. SEIS, EIS, EMI, fantastic place to still start a company. There's no doubt about that. I think so the short answer is yes. I think the things, if anyone here is looking at building a business or starting a business now, I think the one thing we just have to have a strong relationship with reality on is that when interest rates changed from 0% and capital was looking for yield anywhere they could find it, which is a lot of the market we actually built our businesses in, I think it flattered the capital that was available here in the UK. Now that that's not the case anymore, if you're starting a company brand new right now, you have to understand that that's going to be really tough to get funded in the UK because you don't have zero interest rates and pension funds are not investing capital in startups. And so we need to make sure that we fix this problem. Otherwise, what we will find, and I think, Charles, you were just saying just last night, you're working with 3 new companies. They've all had to go and find that capital outside of the UK. And that's the challenge for founders these days. So I would say absolutely we would start again here. There's no doubt about it. But would it be likely that we're all the size of our companies are today in that short period of time? Today? Unlikely.
Yeah, very realistic take, I think. So I want to take advantage of having you 3 on stage, because you have some of the most successful companies here really coming out of the UK. Could you share what has been maybe the biggest challenge for you growing the firms, and any advice for those in the audience today looking to build the unicorn of the future? For each of your respective, even if you're leading the business now.
Phil, you go. I'll go and
Okay,
leave
fine.
Francesca to the last.
So maybe what I'll just talk about is, for us, the biggest thing, it's going to sound obvious, is talent and people. So this has also proven to be one of the most difficult things, especially given the macro. So I'm sure everyone agrees with this, but when you look at, you build a business, it's hard anyway. But over the last sort of 7-8 years, you've almost been doing that on ultra hard mode. It's just been like, whiplash every 6 months. There's something major going on in the world. And there's a lot of knock-on impact to that. But one of the biggest things I've seen that's created a lot of choppiness for us is talent. And what I mean by that is before COVID, all of the big tech companies were hoarding talent. We're just in Buckingham Palace Road in Victoria. We had Google above us and below us in the building, and I had to quite literally usher the engineers out in the evenings and then come and usher them in the morning so that they didn't go to the 3rd or the 1st floor. So you had big tech hoarding talent. That meant that everyone was crazy and wanted ridiculous, packages and, a cactus and a haircut, and that was very difficult. But then you went into COVID, and you had to manage people and their lives. You had to really help our team get through COVID, and there was a range of problems for people. Some people were in a flat chair working from their bed. Other people were very isolated and alone. And so you had that problem. Then you had post-COVID, and you had to bring people back into the office. And of course, some people got really used to not being there. And so you had to figure that out, and then so on and so forth. And so there's just been a lot of people management that we've had to deal with more so than ever before. But I would say a lot of our time goes into talent and people. And I would say, you know, that's the advice really, is investing that time has paid huge dividends for us today.
Thank you.
That was great, Phil. Building on that, I think the other aspect, and I know I said it in the first year, in that I'd never been tested the way I've been tested as CEO more in the first year of a sort of startup than I had my whole career. In that you were doing 20 jobs at the same time, you can't hide in committees in large organizations, the outcome of your decision happens very fast, and you're spending somebody else's money, and your team, their salaries and their livelihoods are dependent on the success and how much cash you've got left in the bank account. That's a big responsibility in relation to a startup. But I grew up on trading floors, and through the financial crises, you get to learn to expect the unexpected. And that's what Phil's actually just talking about in relation to COVID, right? Part of our proposition was built on interest rates. Suddenly overnight, they collapsed. Everyone's working at home, everyone's going digital. And actually conserve capital, we showed leadership. I took proud of it and the rest, but in leadership, a 50% pay cut during COVID to conserve our cash. But actually, it was going to be an accelerator of the business. So again, back to leadership, back to that talent. Culture is the other one, right? And trying to have fun through all of this in relation to living in that tornado as it's moving along and gets faster and isn't for everyone. You've got to have all the ingredients. Humor's a pretty important part in relation to, you know, it's like that management technique of you only got 5 positions in the boat and you've got to get to the island and you've got 10 people. Which 5 do you choose? It's not the 5 brightest necessarily. Who's the one that's actually going to build morale by singing or humor at the low point? All of those things, right, to build a successful, terribly, terribly important. Of course you need brilliant tech. You've actually got to have a great product. You've actually got to have fantastic customers, and you've got to prove your point. But actually, the common theme is leadership, is culture, is people, is determination, is resiliency. And now more than ever, in relation to the geopolitical situation and this massive opportunity ahead of us, the complexity has actually trebled. There's different forms of digital money now. There's all the different regimes. There's a global race going on for payment networks around the whole world. Is the dollar going to backdoor take over the world through backdoor dollarization of stablecoins? Is the UK going to lose its FX markets? We have 38% of the world's global FX. We're no longer going to be in that time zone between, I used to sit at the trading floor, Sydney would hand over, and then we'd hand over to New York and Toronto in the afternoon. 24/7, 365, that advantage is gone. So the complexity has gone up to actually win and become a global winner. But I think, you know, that resiliency, culture, people, talent, and having fun along the way.
Okay, so now it's difficult. No, one thing I was reflecting on is that in my journey, I went through my learning curve because I was not coming from a tech environment. I came from banking when I founded my first company, So, and I was thinking the biggest thing will be to be able to build the best product out there. The tech side will be, if you win that, you win everything. And that's not being mentioned at all, yeah, which is also where I got to. That was not the difficult part. I mean, there's a lot to do. But really, when you find, at least what I found, is that when you found a company, you are a founder, you kind of start from zero, because you really start from a piece of paper in a typically WeWork room. What makes the difference, all the soft things have been mentioned. And for me, one that really makes a difference was resilience. Resilience, is agility, is connecting the dots faster than you have ever done in your life, because in fact you're building something from scratch. It's like an artist, right? So, and I would say that, yeah, people has probably been the biggest challenge for me. Finding the right people, continuously adapting, but also having the best balance of skill set and mindset. You just don't hire anymore based on a CV. So you hire based on the mindset, on all these skills. So it changes, I think, your ways of looking at doing business. but I do think being resilient and agile is what really makes a difference. And so it's not necessarily about knowing the tech, knowing the product, or doing marketing well. It's about everything else. And you need to align the stars there.
Fantastic. So some words to live by there. My team's going to kill me, but we're going to do 2 more minutes. We're going to take 3 questions from the audience, and then you can choose what those 3 are. So can I have 3 people who have an interesting question for this panel? Anyone? Or we can just close it now. Yes, you can literally stand up and shout it out because we don't have any mics. And then a second question? Yeah. Yes? Why don't we close on those 2 and you can answer as you see fit, the 3 of you.
I mean, I can start on the AI, and also I'm happy to give some thoughts on that. But I mean, on the AI, a couple of stats I would mention at Revolut, we get a lot of CVs, probably 1.7 million CVs per year, and we have been in the last 2 years doubling our cohort of graduates and internships. And of course, we're growing fast in total, but we're not doubling in total. So in reality, the young talent, the young graduates, is something that I think we really believe is part of the future. And we learned that it is better to get people early in the company and then grow with the company. And what we're seeing, we are heavy adopters of AI since ever. There's shifts in the way work happens. AI is not just in one department. Cuts across the organization, it changes the ways of working, but also creates new opportunities, also for young people. So I'm not necessarily mirroring it. I know there is a lot of debate right now, but not necessarily needs this to become a shift, because we had similar revolutions in the past, and there were all these prophetic views about, everybody will remain without work. But in reality, it's going to be a shift. There might be some difficult adaptation, but I actually think what we are seeing, that young people and young graduates are actually even more, there's a high demand, so I don't think it will dramatically change the structure. Very quick thought on that, because I went through this myself. You're right, I founded my company. It took us probably more than 9 months on board on a bank until we had to shout to somebody. So there's a problem, but there are solutions in the market. For example, that's why we launched business banking. We work with a lot of SMEs, and not just us. There are a lot of other startups. So I think the world now, there is more choice. And so I think there is, it's been unlocked, a possibility, I would say. But, you know.
Yeah, and to feed off that, I mean, I'll very happy to talk afterwards in relation to whether SME, where you are in the space, but a lot of fintech banks compared to the big 4, very different. Yes, the process is still too long and cumbersome, but the whole onboarding process in relation to people of any bank, particularly banks, it's the process that actually involves the whole bank. And every bank has gone through a transformation program in relation to trying to shorten the cycle time in relation to onboarding. When we founded ClearBank in relation to clearing banks aspects, what we tried to do was just not say no, but actually why we said no. Send those clients off to work on FinCrime, AML and the rest, remediate, then come back and we'll say yes. So often you get a no and you don't know why. And then they hide behind FinCrime or whatever it is that they can't tell you. Anyway, it has got better, and I hear this a lot, but actually in the community, if you get going or certain banks looking at it, you can do it. And there's absolutely no reason in London, unless the risk profile is off the scale, that you can't get a bank account. So we're up for the challenge, I think.
Thanks, Charles. Phil?
Yeah, and then the last, just maybe on AI, I think the short answer is yes. For our business right now, the challenge to the team is, in the next 2 years, you need 20 to 25% more output, and you need 10 to 15% deviation from, the current trajectory on headcount. So you need a 15% reduction in the future headcount. We're not, reducing the headcount from where we are today, but in the future, and you need to be doing 20% more. And all of that is coming through AI efficiency, and you can see that. I think everyone thinks always they go straight to coding, and the problem with coding is, it's a black box a little bit still today. You know, if you think of the world from used to code in assembly, Turbo Pascal, C, C#, .NET, the .NET developer has no clue what's inside the procedure built in C. They just don't know. So if you break something, they can't fix it. That's what we're going to see a lot of going on. There's a lot of tech debt being built up by these AI programming platforms. So we don't like that for our organization, but there is, you know, treasury management. There's people just, you know, basic mundane work that we have teams of people as the business gets bigger, making sure slips for people's expenses are within the expense policy. All of that stuff, you just don't need people for that anymore. So for us, it's more about the go forward. How do we do so much more with many less human headcount? We're actually saying you should think about human and agentic headcount in your teams. So I definitely think you are going to see a bit of a hollowing out of and a different shape to the organization.
Fantastic. Well, Philip, Francesca, Charles, thank you so much for sharing your views. And we'll convene here again probably in a year and see what's changed and if it's still the right place to be. Thank you all so much. Thanks.